I joke with a friend of mine that my life can be divided into two distinct periods, much like the Gregorian or Julian calendars, but rather than BC and AD, I have BC and AC, before chop and after chop. So today I'll share the culmination of my life, BC, and the events leading up to the chop, then some of what has happened, AC. I should also say I always refer to it as the chop, but I know the surgery I underwent was an incredibly complicated medical procedure performed by highly skilled surgeons that wasn't without risk. That I'm standing here today is testament to the skill of those surgeons. I came to finishing writing this out 2 weekends ago. I hadn't even got to the midway point of that recollection, and I was over 4,000 words in, which would have taken around 28 minutes. Had I carried on like that, I'd have been probably stood here for an hour. So this is a very condensed version of that. I always tend to focus on events BC, but the initial request from Carly read, "We've reached out to the sarcoma community, and one of the things they have highlighted as important is the inclusion of inspiring patient stories." So I've tried to divide up what I speak about evenly between BC and AC. So condensing those 4,000 words down into events leading up to the chop. First diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma on Friday, the 13th of February 1998, aged 23, after finding a lump in my neck. This was successfully treated with radiotherapy. Jump forward 25 years, swimming with my family in mid-May 2022, happened to notice a lump in my neck in the same place after my son had asked me to pick him up at the top of a water slide as he was cold. Went to the GP the following day, and so began the 2-week cycle that seemed to define my journey along the cancer pathway. Biopsies, ultrasounds, various other scans, up until the end of June, where I received a call from the ENT doctor I'd seen at the Royal Cornwall Hospital, saying the tumour had been identified as sarcoma. Bearing in mind I'd never heard of sarcoma, I must have just said, "What's that?" To which he replied, "It's a rare type of cancer." And he went on to say, "We don't treat sarcomas here in Cornwall, so you'll be referred on to Derriford, where they have people who specialise in treating sarcoma." As I say, I'd never heard of sarcoma. I did what I guess most people would do at this point, Googled sarcoma. Sort of skim read a few different websites, and the overwhelming thing that I took from what I read was often sarcomas are treated using surgery. No one wants to be told they've got cancer. No one wants to hear those words. But weirdly, having the uncertainty removed, knowing that the lump I can feel is cancer, is better than not knowing. And at least now I know what I'm dealing with. And if they're usually treated with surgery, that means no radio and no chemo. I might not even need to tell the kids. I might be able to spare them all the pain and anxiety associated with a loved one being diagnosed with cancer. Little did I know at this point the scale of the surgery that was coming my way. From that moment on, things really started to get going. Any fellow cancer survivors here will know, once you're in that cycle, once the letters start arriving, the phone calls from numbers you don't recognise, you know it's on, you know it's happening. And I know I was scared. You get to the point with the post whereby you dread its arrival. There's the anxiety that comes with the opening of each new letter for fear of what it's going to say. But you've got to hold your shit together. As frightened as you are, you've got to hold it together and keep finding ways to put one foot in front of the other. It was in this 2-week period where I first started to sense that something big was coming. As the letters started dropping, I remember being a little confused when I received my first letter from Derriford, as the consultation was for a plastic surgery appointment. I recall saying to my wife, "I've got cancer. Why are they sending me for a plastic surgery appointment?" And the names of the surgeons: Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard, Lieutenant Colonel Taylor. I remember saying, "What's with the names? They're a bit formal, aren't they?" Mid-June, we drove up to that first consultation at Derriford, where we met Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard and Lieutenant Colonel Chris Taylor for the first time. Must say at this point, I always refer to them by their full titles. I don't know why, possibly some sort of trauma response, but I always refer to them by the full titles. I'd originally written hundreds, if not thousands, of words about that meeting, but to make it more concise, Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard, dressed in his full naval regalia, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Taylor and Olivia Trott, the Macmillan nurse, enter the room. Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard explained the situation, the treatment options, the need for an area of incision of around 10 millimetres around the tumour. He had a really good way about him. He had a gravitas about him, but he wasn't aloof or in any way grandiose. There was a warmth to him that was reassuring. As he was talking, my mind was wandering a little. I knew what he was saying was of life and death importance, but part of me kept thinking, he really reminds me of Hastings from Line of Duty, and I knew there's a book coming here. And I wasn't wrong. While Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard was explaining how they would remove the tumour, I was also thinking, what do they put in the void where the tumour currently resides? How do they fill the gap? And then came the words I'll never forget. The far right possibility here is, Stephen, we might need to amputate your arm. They're not words you ever expect to hear. I can only describe that moment as like an atom bomb being detonated in your brain. Everything almost goes quiet. But simultaneously, there's 1,000 thoughts ricocheting around your mind. Am I going to die? How will I live with one arm? What about my job? Will my wife, which wasn't my wife at this point, will she still fancy me? Will my kids get teased at school? But you'll be reassured to know my first words upon being given this seismic news were, nah, no way. You can't amputate my arm. I'm a surfer. No chance. It's not happening. I've retold this story a fair few times now, and on reflection, this part of the tale always makes Lieutenant Colonel Taylor sound like the Grim Reaper. But from the back of the room, he simply stated, Stephen, if left, this will kill you. At which point, I just broke down and began to sob. My wife held me and I cried. Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard explained that they'd like to send me for another scan to get a clearer picture, and they would see me again in a week's time after the follow-on scan. Driving back to Cornwall that afternoon, I think it would be fair to say both my wife and I were in shock. I remember saying to her, I'm going to chop off my arm, Catherine. And I'll always remember what she said back to me. It looks like it, yeah. But at least they're giving you a way out. It'd be worse if there wasn't a way out. There's so much more I could share around events BC, but it'll mean we're missing our lunch, and I have a holistic therapy treatment booked in after lunch as well. To round off the BC part, there's two things Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard said to me that I'll never forget. The first being, unfortunately, there's no easy way out of this for you, Stephen. And the second, which he said to me a number of times, we will get you through this. I recorded the following two clips on the morning of the operation, and more than anything I can say to you today, these clips are the realest, rawest, most truthful portrayal of how I was feeling at that moment. 5:10, morning of the operation. Got off to sleep okay, and sort of just coming round then really before the alarm went off. I'm up. Am I going to go? Am I going to do this? I've got to see it as the first day without the cancer. Not the first day without my arm. It's the first day without the cancer. So that's the way I've got to see it. Because the cancer's going to kill me. This is it. I might, yeah. I hope I'm looking back at these and laughing and thinking, God, didn't you make a big deal of it? But, yeah, no by mouth or no coffee. Can't have a coffee before doing it. Come on, you can do this. Oh, so this is pretty heavy. Yeah, this is pretty heavy. I feel a bit sick. I've had some nice cuddles with Catherine. Glad Catherine's here. Looking forward to seeing her tonight. Looking forward to seeing her.
I'll try and talk to him.
Yeah. Coming round after surgery, and it's my wife that's told me this, when they brought me round from the anaesthetic, immediately upon waking, I burst into a chorus of Yellow Submarine by the Beatles. What that's about, I have no idea. Prior to the op, I'd been doing the little video monologues you saw there, primarily for my kids, that if the worst case scenario played out and I didn't make it out of surgery, they'd have something to watch, something to remind them of the dad, something to hear my voice, that sort of thing. I carried on doing these in hospital. BC, I thought there'd be some sort of Trini and Susanna grand reveal of the new me a few days or a week or so after the surgery, but it came the next morning. I was doing one of these video monologues, and there, staring right back at me, was the one-armed, no-shouldered version of me. I thought I'd break down sobbing upon seeing myself, but I didn't. Mr. Marchbank came to see me that morning and told me the surgery had gone well, really well, and they'd got it out with a really good margin of incision. Hearing that was obviously a great fillip. I was visited by the surgeons, by members of their surgical teams, but when Captain Surgeon Professor Roy Rickard came to see me, I remember crying when I repeated back to him those words, "We'll get you through this, Stephen." There's a line at the end of Saving Private Ryan where they've defended the bridge, but to a man, almost all of them have been killed, where Tom Hanks, who himself is dying, says to Matt Damon, "James Ryan, earn this." And that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to earn it. I'm trying to pay back what all those people, all the medical professionals, whether it's the professors or oncologists, the healthcare assistants on the ward, the doctors, the nurses, the surgeons, the cleaners, the people who bring you your lunch, to all those people for all their love, their expertise, their compassion, their skill, their care. Without that, I wouldn't be here. So I just wanted to say thank you for all you do and for all you did for me. And I'm trying to earn what isn't just a second chance at life, it's at least my third. When I first got dressed in hospital and put on my hospital PJs, the superfluous left sleeve hanging down just looked really sorry for itself. And I knew I couldn't wear my clothes like that. I wanted to own the one arm thing. So as you can see, I get all my clothes adapted. That way there's no ambiguity around my appearance. I always knew that I'd need to find something that gave my life purpose during recovery. The first thing I threw myself into was my own clothing brand, which began life as Chopped, but now it's called the Chopped Collective. Check us out on Instagram, and it's morphed into something I never thought it would. It's a lifestyle brand focused primarily around surfing and skateboarding, but also good music and art. I have around a dozen team riders who, to use the youth vernacular, rep for the brand. Basically, I give them t-shirts and the like, and they tag the brand in any of the edits or pictures they post on social media. It's about turning a negative into a positive. It was a friend of mine who said to me, "I don't think you realise the effect that probably has on them, that someone believes in them enough to give them t-shirts, sweaters, whatever. It's something they'll always remember." And I love seeing how they're growing not only as surfers or skaters, but as decent, caring, empathetic humans. The Chop motto is never give up, never give in. I've been fortunate that my recovery has been fairly linear. There hasn't, touch wood, to date been any real setbacks. Toward the end of February 2023, I got back in the sea for the first time, and by June, I was able to catch and ride waves again. The talk is titled One Way Back, primarily because the thing I wanted to get back doing more than anything was to surf. I couldn't envisage my life without surfing. It's that desire to get back surfing that has driven my recovery. A friend of mine said to my mum at Catherine and I's wedding party in October 2023, "It's a good job he had surfing." I'm really, really lucky that I can still do and enjoy the thing I love doing the most, surfing. In August 2023, I entered into the Welsh Parasurf Open, which was 372 days after the op. I came second in my category in that event. At the back end of September 23, I won my category at the English Parasurf Comp and retained my title at last year's event. Last June, I went with a group of friends to the Maldives, where I surfed twice a day for 2 hours at a time in the most beautiful place with incredible waves. There'd be moments sat on my board in the Indian Ocean where I stop and take it all in. How lucky am I to be here, to be experiencing this? At the start of the year, I got accepted onto the Surfing England Parasurf team, which is a real honour, as every one of the other team members have incredible stories of resilience, of overcoming adversity, and of not being defined by what has happened to them. I suppose my goal with that, should parasurfing ever make it to the Olympics, would be to try and be a part of the team at Brisbane 2032. I read somewhere in autumn 2022 that 2/3 of disabled people who are employed are self-employed, which set in motion a belief in me that I'm probably going to need to find a way of being self-employed. Over the last 2 years, I've been working on combining my passion for and love of both surfing and coffee with my own coffee brand, which goes by the name of Dawn Patrol. Dawn Patrol being the name given to those surfers who rise at dawn to catch the first waves of the day. The basic USP of Dawn Patrol is to source coffee from regions of the world synonymous with great tasting coffee and fantastic surf. Every coffee in the range takes its name from a wave in far-flung places around the globe. Obviously, I'd love it if it can become my sole source of income, with the dream of one day selling enough coffee to visit these places and surf the waves. But it's a long way from realising that dream yet. So if you are a coffee lover, keen to support a one-armed entrepreneur, sarcoma survivor, check out www.dawnpatrol.co.uk. To get the funding to start Chopped, I enrolled on a startup business course, which, if they approved your business plan, they give you a grant to get started. One of the advisors on that course said to me, rather than flogging t-shirts, have you ever thought about public speaking? To which I was like, no, I haven't. Why? And he said, you're a really good orator. You could probably get a couple of £100 a go doing public speaking. You've got to sell a lot of t-shirts to make the same sort of money. My first attempt at public speaking was to my son's class. He said to me one day, please, can you come into school and tell everyone why you've only got one arm so they don't keep asking me? I've done half a dozen assemblies in school, which tend to be on the theme of resilience. I've been on the radio a few times and I've been on a few different podcasts then. Last year, Olivia invited me to speak at a patient event they were running up in Devon, and earlier this year, Carly asked if I'd be interested in speaking at today's event. My goal, I suppose, is to tie in the surfing, the coffee and the public speaking into something that pays the bills. It's not there yet. In fact, it's a long way from being there. But life's never about the destination. It's always about the journey. And I hope my children can look at me and how I faced up to the challenge and be proud of how I've overcome it. If you'd have said to me this time 3 years ago, or in the immediate aftermath of being told it would be necessary to amputate my arm, that 3 years on my life would look the way it does, I wouldn't have believed it. Over the last 3 years, as a result of what has happened, I've met and become friends with so many sound people who I would never have met if this hadn't happened. I've had experiences and done things I probably wouldn't have done. It doesn't detract from the trauma of what has happened. It doesn't diminish the phantom limb pain or the social anxiety around the way I feel. But I feel incredibly fortunate to have survived sarcoma. I share my journey as an amputee on Instagram. If you wanted to follow me, you'll find me at the One Arm Surfer. And to finish, I'd like to share a Carl Jung quote, which really resonates with me. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Thank you for your time.